If you enjoy this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and if you would like to support the channel on Patreon or PayPal, the links are listed below.
You mentioned playing the role of good villains, as though there was something particularly juicy about a good villainous part for you.
There is, because the villain has so many sides. I do a lecture around the country. I've been a lecturer for about 20 years now, and I do a lecture now on the history of villainy. They're always the best parts, you know. It's that marvelous thing of Gene Kerr's "The snake has all the lines," you know. Adam and Eve just stand there, but the snake's got all the lines. And the villain is usually such a many-faceted character. He's a very interesting person to study. There are all kinds of villains. There's the villain that is a villain in spite of himself. There is the villain who is a born villain. I mean, the kind who sort of were born that way. And then there are villains that are the most interesting ones, I think, who are turned to evil by fate, really, by the wounds, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I've gone to see some of the Poe pictures that I've done, and the kids just love them, you know, and so do the adults. There is a charge. It's the same charge you get out of a nursery story, isn't it, of a fairy tale.
If I could pick out a classic actor with the most diverse range of roles on stage, film and TV in every genre, I would pick Vincent Price, who was one of the most notable character actors throughout the golden age of Hollywood and beyond, evolving into one of the most iconic legends of horror. When you think of horror actors, Price is among the greats, like Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi and Peter Lorre. Price even has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for motion pictures and one for television, which is extremely rare, and that iconic voice is a trademark of popular horror.
I'm Frederick Lauren, and I've rented the house on Haunted Hill tonight so that my wife can give a party. A haunted house party. She's so amusing. There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited. If any of you will spend the next 12 hours in this house, I'll give you each $10,000, or your next of kin in case you don't survive.
After a string of character roles in the 1940s, in films like Leave Her to Heaven, Laura, and Dragonwyck, in 1946, Price revitalized his film career and established himself as one of the leading actors in horror by starring in the film House of Wax in 1953. Strangely enough, I was introduced to Vincent Price at a young age through his many TV appearances. The first one that comes to mind was on 2 episodes set in Hawaii, titled Past the Taboo and the Tiki Caves, on season 4 of The Brady Bunch. In these episodes, Price played an eccentric archaeologist who holds the Brady Boys captive in the Tiki Caves after thinking that the boys are after his latest find. House of Wax, released in 1953, was a remake of the Warner Brothers 1933 film Mystery of the Wax Museum, which was directed by Michael Curtiz and starred Fay Wray, and was based on an unpublished short story, The Waxworks, by Charles Belden. The remake, House of Wax, was a period film starring Vincent Price as wax sculptor Henry, who learns that his business partner Matthew plans on setting their wax museum on fire to collect on the insurance policy. Henry survives the confrontation and fire and re-emerges some years later and opens a wax museum of his very own. A dark cloaked figure commits a number of murders. The victims' bodies start to go missing from the city morgue. Among the people killed is Henry's ex-business partner. Art student Sue Allen, after visiting the wax museum, finds that one of the wax figures looks familiar to one of the murder victims. Through the course of the film, she uncovers the truth that some of the wax figures in the displays are in fact the corpses of the victims. It is revealed that Henry is in fact the killer, whose face is left burnt and disfigured For House of Wax, André de Toth was hired as the director just after directing the film noir Crime Wave in 1953, which would also be written by House of Wax screenwriter Crane Wilbur. While looking for a script for his new Gary Cooper film, André de Toth came across the 1933 film Mystery of the Wax Museum and wanted to remake the film. There were a number of significant story changes from the earlier film and its setting, which was changed from 1933 to 1902. Two main characters were also taken out of the story. Originally, in the 1933 film, the sculptor was an alcoholic and a heroin addict, but that had to be changed for the remake because of the production code, which banned any mention of drug addiction. The original working title for House of Wax was originally The Waxworks. André de Toth was very keen to remake the film in 3D after seeing the new format used for the surprise hit B-movie Buona Devil in 1952 to great effect. Buona Devil was in fact the first film to start off the 3D film craze, as well as being the first feature-length 3D film in colour. Warner Brothers was in fact the first studio to use the 3D format for their live-action 1934 comedy short titled Service with a Smile. De Toth would convince studio boss Jack Warner to agree to fund the project for over $1 million. After House of Wax, the 3D process became even more successful, drawing in cinema goers during the early to mid to late 50s. Vincent Price, a respected character actor known for his dramatic roles in films, was cast as Professor Henry Jared, the tortured artist who seeks revenge. It was after his role in House of Wax that Price became a fully fledged horror star, playing a vast array of horror roles throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. For the role of Sue Allen, a number of actors were considered, including Joan Weldon and Vera Miles, before Phyllis Kirk was chosen. Originally, Phyllis Kirk turned down the film, but since she was under contract with Warner Brothers, she had no choice but to appear in the film. Kirk would almost constantly complain.
I don't know whether The House of Wax was your favorite movie you ever did or not. You may think
it was not.
Achieved greater heights of artistry, but I always think of The House of Wax because I saw it in 3D with the glasses.
So does everybody else
Yeah.
think of The House of Wax. When Jack Warner told me, I was under contract with Warner Brothers at the time that picture was made, and Mr. Warner came to me and told me that I was going to be in The House of Wax and told me what it was about, and I screamed and yelled and said, I will not become the Fay Ray of my time.
Among the actors to appear was then unknown Charles Bronson, who was cast in the film as Igor, but credited in the film as Charles Baczynski. Carolyn Jones was cast in the supporting role as Kathy Gray, one of the victims in the film. Her role in House of Wax was actually one of her first roles, and she appeared in a number of films throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. In later years, her most known role to audiences was in the TV comedy horror hit The Addams Family as Morticia Addams. Nedrick Young was cast as the alcoholic assistant, Leon, but was uncredited because he had been blacklisted during the Joseph McCarthy Red Scare era in Hollywood. House of Wax was shot in 33 days, going under budget, costing $618,000 to make. Shooting in 3D and Technicolor would prove to be difficult, especially with Vincent Price's makeup, which had to look very convincing. The makeup on Price was very impressive indeed, with a patchwork of hideous burns that would shock film audiences, and during the shoot would even make employees feel sick on the Warner Brothers backlot. The brilliant makeup was created by makeup artist Gordon Bow, who is not actually credited for his amazing work on the film, which was clearly an injustice, as the makeup is some of the best horror makeup ever produced. During filming, it was very easy for Vincent Price to act alarmed during the fire sequence. Right before the shoot, the crew set 3 spot fires in different locations on the set. As cameras started filming, the team lost control of the fires, which would merge and turn into a massive fire, even putting a hole in the soundstage roof. But de Toth kept on filming even as firemen were arriving to put out the fire for the scene where Scott Andrews, played by Paul Pickerney, is rescued from the guillotine by Lieutenant Tom Brennan just seconds before the blade comes down, was actually filmed in one take. In fact, the blade used was a real guillotine blade. Pickerney refused to do the scene, as he considered it far too dangerous. After he refused to do the scene, director de Toth got into a very heated argument with him and threw him off the set. A number of days later, studio head Jack Warner demanded de Toth get him back. The prop department modified the guillotine to make it more safe. After examining the guillotine, Pickerney said he would do one take and no more, which is exactly what happened. The exterior set for the Wax Museum can be seen today in the Warner Brothers backlot. The film's world premiere was held at the Paramount Theatre in Los Angeles on April the 16th of 1953. Bela Lugosi was hired to help promote the film. Lugosi arrived at the premiere dressed in a vampire cape, emerging from his limousine with a leash chained to an actor in an ape costume. This was actually a homage to his film a year before, titled Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. At the box office, House of Wax was Warner Brothers' 5th top-grossing film of the year, and was reportedly their biggest film since Life with Father in 1947. In Europe, the film was an even bigger success. There weren't actually a lot of 3D effects in the film, but the most effective 3D scenes were in the Wax Museum fire scenes, the Can-Can Girls scene, and the paddleball scenes, with the most effective scene being the scene where we see a shadowy figure running into the screen, springing up at the theatre audience. Interesting to note that director Andre de Toth was actually blind in one eye and was unable to experience the 3D effects in the film. Some modern critics believe that de Toth's inability to see the film in 3D was what makes the film superior, because he was more concerned by telling a thrilling story with believable performances from the actors than simply throwing things at the camera. One critic remarked, "His set pieces are shadowy and quick moving, generating solid excitement, becoming atmospheric locales of alleyways and museums. The film's design makes the most of its studio sets when de Toth stages his action within them, and there is that right balance of chills, thrills, and genuine creepiness to the film." In the film, Vincent Price gives a magnetic performance as the tortured, revenge-seeking villain. And he isn't just your standard villain, and there are many dimensions to his character. For a film that was made under budget, House of Wax made a great return at the box office, making over $5.5 million. Warner Brothers would try to replicate its box office success the following year with another 3D horror film titled The Phantom of the Rue Morgue in 1954. Unfortunately, the film bombed at the box office. There were countless 3D films made after House of Wax, but the 3D craze would fade out towards the late 1950s and was soon abandoned by mainstream Hollywood. Of course, years later, the 3D craze would resurface in the mid to late 1970s and the early 1980s. In the mid-1960s, Warner Brothers would try to resurrect House of Wax on TV. At this time, television was going through a horror craze, so the studio saw great benefit in making a series. The story revolved around the owner and employees of a wax museum becoming amateur detectives who would solve a number of bizarre crimes. The series would use sets that were originally used for the original 1953 film. The pilot was filmed, but was sadly rejected for being too intense for network television. The pilot was, however, turned into a padded-out 99-minute film version and was released in cinemas in 1966 and titled Chamber of Horrors. House of Wax would revitalize the film career of Vincent Price and turn him into a leading horror actor, playing an assortment of leads in A-grade to B-grade horror films, making him the horror icon and legend he is today. Throughout the years, there have been a number of horror films inspired by House of Wax, with a loose remake in the slasher horror style in 2005. House of Wax in 1953 was a major hit worldwide, launching Vincent Price's career to new heights and elevating the 3D craze in the 1950s. It's also a rather good creepy horror film with some very eerie and suspenseful moments. My name's Jonathan. Thanks for watching.